This happened while you were sleeping. Magyar has opened a new front against Russia. The losses in Putin's ranks have reached the hundreds. The first loud results: retaliation has never been like this. This Ukrainian tactic is changing the rules of the game. The final chord: Putin has burned the last bridges with the USA. The Kremlin has begun a purge among its own. There is already a first victim. At the same time, Washington is preparing a strike personally against the dictator. Trump will do it with his own hands. Lavrov started whining live on air for the last time. Russia is exposed. A new migration of air defense systems. Putin has given the final order, realizing that even this will no longer save him. Ukraine has launched a shocking scenario, a new direction of attack on Putin. Ukraine and the underground have reached the heart of the Russian system. The Kremlin did not expect this. Ukraine has gained allies inside Russia. And all of this happened right now. Hello, I'm Daryna Huts'kalo, and we are starting. Under the cover of night, Magyar launched a new special operation. Ukraine has officially opened the hunt for Russia in the Black Sea.
The next cluster of the SBS Moloshka operation has been uncorked for Ukrainian Statehood Day. SBS birds in the Black Sea. The score is open. 21 tankers were hunted in the Black Sea on the night of July 15th.
According to Magyar, the first round of the naval battle is over, and it is clearly not in the Kremlin's favor. In the Sea of Azov, 116 vessels of Russia's Shadow Fleet came under attack. But the most interesting part came next. In the Black Sea, the tally is just for the first day of the new special operation. Minus 17 oil tankers, 2 gas tankers, and a tugboat. Russian maritime logistics are falling apart at the seams, and the Kremlin is rapidly losing control over its own sea routes.
We will stand firm. Moscow will fall. Dairy power in action. We will nourish and rebuild Crimea.
The Russians can feel their end is near. Ukraine is methodically pushing straight into the enemy's rear. The strike on the Russian patrol ship Izumrud is proof of that.
A satellite image confirms the destruction of the Russian border patrol ship Izumrud at the dock. We continue to reduce the potential of the Russian aggressor at sea.
Historical justice. It has finally caught up with the occupiers. For Ukrainian sailors, the destruction of the Izumrud holds special symbolism. It was this ship that was among those which attacked Ukrainian military boats in the Kerch Strait on November 25, 2018. 7 years later, the boomerang has come back around.
Everyone who was in any way involved in the aggression against Ukraine will receive just punishment or retribution.
At this very moment, the last bridge between Moscow and Washington has been burned. The United States may impose sanctions personally against Putin. This is reported by Axios, revealing truly shocking details. Thus, a group of senators from both parties has submitted an updated bill. It concerns large-scale sanctions against Russia, calling it a tribute to Lindsey Graham's memory. The document provides for mandatory sanctions against Vladimir Putin, Russian banks, energy companies, defense industry enterprises, and the shadow fleet of oil tankers.
We must seize the opportunity we have to finally exert economic pressure on the Kremlin and end this war.
Moscow took this signal very painfully and is now trying to shift the blame for the failure of its own plans onto everyone else. For example, Lavrov has once again invoked the spirit of anchorage. The head of the Russian Foreign Ministry, who is trying to return to the topic of agreements in Alaska, is accusing Ukraine and Europe of allegedly forcing the United States to change its position.
Up until this very moment, they have certainly done absolutely everything in their power to try to steer the United States of America far away from its original course. President Trump does not comment on these attempts and does not say that Alaska no longer exists. But the Europeans and the Ukrainian regime have publicly stated that the Alaskan agreements are dead. We have buried them.
Let us note that back in June, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly refuted Moscow's main narrative. He emphasized that no agreements regarding Ukraine were made in Alaska. There were only certain proposals discussed. Moreover, out of desperation, the head of the Kremlin has started purging people responsible for relations with the United States. There is already a first high-profile victim. Kirill Dmitriev may soon be dismissed from his position as Putin's special representative.
Dmitriev's resignation may signify the end of the Kremlin's business contacts with the White House, according to a source from Nezigar.
It seems that indeed the spirit of anchorage has officially been replaced by an atmosphere of total fear and failure, so more is yet to come. Russia has exposed its northern front. Key military facilities in the far north have been left without reliable air cover. Amid a powerful campaign of Ukrainian strikes, Moscow is forced to shift resources and patch up gaps in its own defenses. On these
Images from July 6th, it is clear that the Rogachevo airbase on Novaya Zemlya has been left practically without cover. The air defense missile base deployed there, back in 2015, lost most of its equipment.
Finally, the myth of Russia's impenetrable air defense is beginning to crumble. According to independent analysts, since the start of the full-scale invasion, about 60% of S-300 and S-400 air defense systems have been redeployed from the locations where they were stationed before 2022. So there is only one conclusion. Even distant regions that the Kremlin considered untouchable for years can no longer feel safe. Ukraine is relentless as never before. Russia's last gasoline stronghold is under attack.
The Special Operations Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, commenting on the attack on Gazprom Neftekhim Salavat, emphasized that this complex, located in the city of Salavat, Republic of Bashkortostan, was the last major gasoline producer that had not yet been hit this year.
The drones traveled about 1,500 kilometers and struck one of the key facilities of Russian oil refining. But this time there is another detail that could especially infuriate Moscow. Ukrainian special forces stated that the operation was carried out in cooperation with an underground movement within the territory of the Russian Federation. Black Spark. The target was the critical primary oil distillation unit AVT-6 and other production facilities of the plant. The map of the Kremlin's untouchable sites continues to crumble, and the Russian rear is increasingly turning into a zone of constant danger. Putin has never been this scared before. His fortress no longer seems so unreachable, and even the symbols of luxury and escape for the Russian elite are now under new threat. Radars have detected the bunker dweller's yacht. Every man for himself. The Kremlin elite may need their backup escape plan much sooner than they expected. Meanwhile, Russian air defense has once again found itself at the center of a major failure. Is the myth of Russia's impenetrable defense finally starting to fall apart? Let's watch.
Putin's yachts are leaving their home harbor. Two elite vessels belonging to the private fleet of the Russian dictator have left Russian territorial waters at once. A week ago, a yacht set sail from the coast of Krasnodar Krai, Victoria. It passed through the Bosphorus and set course for the Turkish resort city of Bodrum. And just a few days later, a real sensation swept through the European media. The super yacht, Graceful, was spotted in Danish territorial waters. However, it now has a new name. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Russians renamed Graceful to Kosatka Orka. The vessel, which was moving under the escort of two Russian warships, was filmed by German journalist Frank Berling.
At our publication, I am responsible for everything related to shipping, and of course, I closely monitor the Russian fleet in the Baltic Sea. From my own sources, I knew that some ships were coming, but I didn't know exactly which ones. On Sunday afternoon, I went to the island of Fehmarn and started waiting. And suddenly I saw military vessels. But they weren't alone. In front was the snow-white yacht Graceful, which we all know very well. I didn't expect to see it.
Graceful, or rather the Orca, hadn't been seen at sea for more than 4 years. A few weeks before the start of the Great War, Putin's yacht was urgently evacuated from Hamburg, Germany. There it was undergoing modernization in Kaliningrad. Since then, the vessel has not been tracked in international monitoring systems due to its automatic identification system being turned off. So why did the Orca suddenly stop hiding, and where is it headed?
Obviously, there is some reason why the owner of the yacht, who is likely Vladimir Putin, has started to worry about its safety. I think that after the recent attacks on St. Petersburg, Kronstadt and Primorsk, the Russians have become concerned that the yacht could also be damaged or even destroyed. As for the route, if it really departed from Kaliningrad, I don't think its final destination is Turkey. For such a vessel, that's too long a journey. I think it's most likely heading north.
The estimated value is over $100 million with a length of 82 meters. Across its 5 decks, there is a helipad, a cinema, and an indoor pool that can be transformed into a dance floor. Luxurious interiors. Putin's yachts were shown by Russian opposition investigators a few years ago. German journalist Frank Belling noticed yet another new element of the exterior.
The entire vessel was literally covered with nets. They stretched from the mast forward and backward, covering the deck. This is enough to protect against an ordinary small drone. It is obvious that in Russia they are afraid of drone attacks.
But why was Graceful or Kosatka allowed to calmly pass through Germany's exclusive economic zone and Denmark's territorial waters? Why did the Americans impose sanctions against it, but the Europeans did not? Why, in the end, was it not detained like the Scheherazade was? Another super yacht believed to be owned by Vladimir Putin. This expensive toy of the Russian dictator has been, since May 2022, under arrest in a Tuscan port, Marina di Carrara.
The explanation is actually quite simple. If, for example, this yacht had suffered a serious engine failure and ended up in German territorial waters, it would no longer have been able to continue its voyage. Right now, most likely, it would be docked in a German port and would have been detained. In such a case, the authorities have full legal capacity to act. At the same time, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea guarantees the right of innocent passage. This means that despite all the sanctions, the vessel has the right to pass freely through the EU's exclusive economic zone. The yacht was accompanied by Russian warships, so any country that wanted to board it would have been taking a risk of military confrontation with Russia. I don't think anyone is ready for that right now.
And one more thing. Proving who actually owns the vessel is very difficult.
Usually these are complex legal structures. Unfortunately, it's about money. Lawyers often work for oligarchs for big money. And everyone may know that the yacht belongs to a certain person, but legally it can be very complicated to prove it. And in this way, the rule of law is used against the West. For our part, we can say that we are monitoring this situation and we are working with our partners to possibly make decisions that would immobilize the relevant assets. We'll see what we can achieve.
A telling example is the story of the super yacht Dilbar, which is linked to the Russian oligarch Alisher Usmanov. After the start of the full-scale war, the billionaire came under EU sanctions, and his vessel was detained in one of the German ports. And just recently, the Administrative Court of Frankfurt lifted the sanctions restrictions from the Dilbar.
Essentially, the court stated that the yacht does not belong to Usmanov, but to a trust that he does not control. It's ridiculous. I've been working in the industry for several decades, and here everyone knows who owns this vessel. There is no doubt about it. About the owner.
However, the court's decision is not final and can be appealed. Tatiana Loganova. Details.
The Kremlin may be in for a cold shower. Ukraine is moving from defense to creating its own missile shield. The US decision on missile production? For Patriot, this is not just a new arms delivery, but a change in the very logic of the war. For years, Russia built its advantage on ballistics, but now Kyiv is preparing a response that Moscow definitely would not want to see. Could this be the beginning of the end? The end of the era of Russian missile blackmail? Let's watch.
Although the permission to manufacture missiles for the Patriots is still only verbal, no one doubts anymore that Ukraine will receive it very soon. Now a completely different question arises: when will the first missiles roll off the assembly line? After all, just this week, Russia launched a massive attack on Kyiv with drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles. And what about other regions of Ukraine? The United States did not publicly respond to these strikes. Neither the White House nor the State Department even offered words of sympathy. But just a few days later, at a meeting with Zelensky in Ankara, Donald Trump himself brought up missiles for the Patriots. And he proposed a solution that Kyiv had been requesting from Washington for years.
A little bird told me that we will grant Ukraine the right to produce missiles for the Patriots. We will show them how it's done. It's very complicated. But you will quickly understand the complexity. We will talk with the president about granting them licenses to produce Patriots. Pretty cool, right?
Trump even threatened that now Zelensky won't be able to complain that the US isn't giving enough. Basically, do it yourselves. However, he noted that the Patriot manufacturer isn't aware of this yet, but he'll sort everything out. After a warm conversation with the president of Ukraine, Trump promised to call the Kremlin chief. And we remember well how often this happened. After such contacts, the American leader would change his rhetoric. But this time, Trump didn't even call Putin. The Kremlin took offense and stated that Washington is showing duplicity in its position on the Russian-Ukrainian war, granting licenses and weapons, while at the same time claiming it wants to promote the peace process.
As for the Patriots, yes, that's an obvious fact. The United States continues to actively supply Ukraine with weapons and military technologies. We really do know this. We are not looking at the situation through rose-colored glasses. President Putin understands this perfectly well too. That's why there is a certain duplicity in the position of the United States.
It seems that Washington has indeed changed its view of this war. All overseas publications unanimously note that relations between the presidents of the US and Ukraine have noticeably warmed. And this happened when Ukraine began to seize the initiative and regularly strike at Russian energy infrastructure, writes The Hill. And it reminds us that the American leader criticized the previous administration's policy regarding military support for Ukraine. And less than a year and a half ago, he was putting pressure on Zelensky, including publicly in the Oval Office, demanding that Ukraine cede its territories to Russia. Now, however, the rhetoric in Washington has changed dramatically.
Are you talking about Ukraine's ability to penetrate deep into Russia? For strikes. I think this is one of the dynamics that has changed in this war over the past few months. Namely, because it is becoming increasingly difficult for the Russians to defend their own airspace. We hope that this will create space for negotiations to end this war.
But for now, there is neither a ceasefire nor interceptors. If the license is indeed granted, Ukraine will become the third country in the world able to produce Patriot missiles under localization terms. Japan was the first. 20 years ago, it reached an agreement for partial production of PAC-3 missiles at Mitsubishi facilities. It took the Japanese 2 years to launch production. And even now, they still receive key components from the United States. Germany also has a license. In 2022, they reached an agreement with the Americans to produce PAC-2 missiles. They only began building the production line in 2024, and the first missiles have not yet come off the assembly line, still to this day. They are expected only next year, and they promise to immediately transfer them to Ukraine. Which specific missile we will be allowed to produce is still unknown, but experts are already warning. Establishing the facility and launching serial production could take years. Everything will depend on Ukraine's industrial capabilities, the level of localization, and how quickly the manufacturing companies and our governments can reach an agreement. Moreover, Bloomberg and the New York Times warn that a plant in Ukraine will immediately become one of the main targets for Russian strikes. If the facility is built in the EU, a major problem will remain. There is a severe shortage of components and suppliers. Reuters sources report that most likely Ukrainian Patriots will be produced in Germany, where the production line is ready and supply chains are established. But despite this, having our own production will become a strategic advantage. We will be less dependent on the decisions of our partners and will be able to independently provide for our own air defense.
Ukraine has been recognized by America as a country that is ready to do this. Indeed, right now we have a window of opportunity. Ukraine has become stronger both on the battlefield and in the air. And everyone can see the corresponding results. Undoubtedly, first and foremost, thanks to our military, I am very grateful to them.
A license to produce missiles for Patriots, the backbone of our air defense, could become one of the most important decisions for Ukrainian defense in all the years of the war. But even if the agreements are formalized in the very near future, the first Ukrainian-made missiles will not appear tomorrow or even next year. So it will be future generations who will defend the Ukrainian sky from Russian ballistic missiles, German, Japanese, and US-purchased missiles, which, amid the shortage, the American president has promised to deliver in the very near future. From New York, Yuri Hulam and Ukraine Marathon. United News.
You have to see this. The Kremlin is losing its main trump card in the Black Sea. Ukraine has forced the Russian fleet into hiding. Magyar delivered a strike after which Moscow is counting its losses. Enemy ships are going to the bottom in droves. Ukraine is blocking the Russians' access to the Azov coast, and Crimea is increasingly turning into a trap for the occupiers. The Russians are sounding the alarm. Their end could be loud and painful. All the details about this are coming up next.
Yes, this is how Magyar is taking down the Russian shadow fleet. Dozens of oil tankers destroyed every night. For the second week in a row, ships in the Sea of Azov are under fire.
This is a historic precedent. There has never been a case in the history of the Sea of Azov where so many vessels have been hit.
The first tankers were struck by the Ukrainian Armed Forces unmanned systems on July 6th. At that time, 2 sanctioned ships were delivering 7,000 tons of fuel each to Crimea. But they didn't deliver it.
Right now, fuel prices are at record highs. In Crimea, for example, they are even much higher than in Ukraine. That's the official price. If you look at speculative prices, they're even higher.
Due to Ukrainian attacks, Russia has suspended shipping through the Kerch Strait. And that means the occupied Crimea is left completely without fuel.
With gasoline and diesel in the territory of the Russian Federation, temporarily occupied Crimea, this is the result. It affects not only civilians who can't fill up their cars, it also affects trucks, buses and others. This is diesel fuel used by the military.
And air defense systems and radars and electronic warfare systems, all of this requires significant power supply. If it's not available, it has to come from generators. To provide it, well, if there's no fuel, then there's nothing to power the generators with either.
The frightened Federation has suspended shipping through the Azov-Don Canal as well. And this could seriously impact Russian grain exports. After all, Russia transports about a quarter of its wheat for sale via this route.
As a matter of fact, what we are currently witnessing right now is a comprehensive naval blockade of at least the occupied Crimea.
Besides tankers, Russia has few ways to supply Crimea with fuel, either underwater or by aircraft. But these options are very limited, experts say, and there are virtually no other routes left.
Because this route along the Sea of Azov has been cut off and the bridges on both isthmuses have been disrupted. The Crimean Bridge is currently facing a very serious and imminent threat that jeopardizes its structural integrity. The vital transportation link between the cities of Kerch and Jankoy has been completely cut off, causing a major disruption. Furthermore, the essential ferry service operating from the port of Kavkaz to the port of Kerch has effectively been halted, leaving the region's logistics in a state of total paralysis and isolation.
The destruction of oil tankers in the Sea of Azov will affect the situation at the front, since a significant part of Putin's army will not be able to receive fuel.
This blockade will in the future extend to the Black Sea as well, in order to cut off as much as possible the grouping of Russian troops in occupied Crimea, and as a result, the grouping of Russian troops located in the south, the grouping of troops on the left bank of the Kherson region, and partially in the Zaporizhzhia direction. This is the Dnipro troop grouping.
Thus, the bastion of Russian military power in Crimea is turning into a graveyard for ships.
There were some amusing situations when they were forced to hide their supply vessels, which were operating routes. For example, to Syria, they had to hide them in the territorial waters of NATO member countries from US.
And with that, the Russians' dominance at sea has essentially come to an end. But the battle continues. Victoria Yarishko, We Are Ukraine, Marathon United News.
With this, we put a period to our broadcast. We continue right now to follow the most up-to-date events so we can be the first to tell you about them. Don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.